Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Super Review Show's Career Retrospectives. Right here on the Super Review Show, I am joined by my two good co-hosts and good friends, Kyle and Mike. What's going on, guys?
Hey,
Yo, excuse my Darth Vader voice. Got the cold going, so yeah, it's gonna get ugly this time around. But I'll do my best to stay in here.
March is known for like the post winter and nothing but colds and sneezing and we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's all right. Anyways, so tonight's show is after we spun the Wheel of Doom or the Wheel of Fun or whatever we're gonna call it. The wheel spun, and we're good tonight. We're gonna be reviewing the first album we talked about in the wheel that landed on Aerosmith's "Toys in the Attic." Truly a pioneering album from 1975. It was their third album, so we're gonna get right into it in a second. I'd like to start this one off tonight, if that's okay.
I fully consent to that. I give my full consent.
He's like, okay, good. So after spinning the wheel of awesomeness, this we're gonna call it the Wheel of Awesomeness. That's okay. This is an album that it came in 1975, and it was their breakthrough album from that time period. One of my favorite albums of them in general. I mean, this was my pick on the wheel. But when you think about the 70s, you typically think about, when you think of hard rock or whatnot in the 70s, you typically think of Kiss, Led Zeppelin, or Aerosmith. In my mind, at least, in my own mindset as well. And Aerosmith's one of those bands that I've always been a fan of. Every time they're on, I was like, man, like Sweet Emotion, Toys in the Attic, Walk This Way. Just really, really, really great songs in general throughout their career as a whole. One of my favorite bands growing up. Truthfully, I mean, I get it, old taste. It's okay. No, don't kill me. But I just a great band, a great album. And yeah, I'm ready to talk about it. Mike, what are your initial impressions of Aerosmith?
Yeah, so I mean, I've never listened to a full Aerosmith album. Once again, moving into uncharted territory for me, and I should have listened to more because they're kind of one of those bands that like have a lot of some classic songs and stuff like that. So going into this was an interesting kind of experience. I was surprised to notice that most of the songs that I knew from them were kind of on this album, except like obviously some of the newer stuff, and then Dream On, but overall, there's a big thing holding back this album for me, and it's like baking a cake and then leaving off the frosting, or like leaving off some ingredient that it's a cake, but it's just like that thing that makes it pop. And that for me is just kind of like, I'll go into more about what that is, but I've always had a lot of respect for them. Maybe not like so much like the individual members, but as a whole, as a name of classic rock. And on a musical compilation, it definitely holds its own place. But as an entire album, might be the area that I find myself struggling to kind of see the entire picture. But as like having those hits on those compilations, or just having those hits that you hear on the radio, definitely some iconic tunes on this one. So yeah, we'll go over more about that when we do the breakdown.
And the Q&A-ter.
Q&A-ter.
Me and Mike are pretty much on the same wavelength here for the most part. Aerosmith to me has always been a greatest hits band. I've always struggled to get into their albums as a whole. Whenever I try, I find a lot of the track lists on most of the records that I've listened to be very hit or miss. You throw on a greatest hits Aerosmith record and I'll thoroughly enjoy it. No, this isn't a bad album. I do have my problems with it that I'll get into when we talk about specific songs and track lists. But yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with Mike on that I can never get gripped into an Aerosmith record. Whenever I start listening to it, I'm just like some good songs will happen. And then there's just like a song that I'm like, why is this here? But this is a problem, not just with Aerosmith. This is a problem that I've had with a lot of bands from the 70s era, specifically like early to mid 70s, back when the idea with record labels was you need to put something out every year or people are going to forget about you. I think that led to a lot of filler tracks. Whereas nowadays, and even into the 80s, I think it started to become a realization that you can just put out a good album, wait a couple of years, and put out another good album, rather than here's an album, here's another one the next year, next year. I think a lot of bands fell into that trap.
Yeah.
All righty, there's our initial impressions. Let's jump over to the track listing. For those who are listening to us, just sit back, relax, and enjoy. Right now we're on the Wikipedia page. Here we are talking about it, and I'll read off the track listing if that's okay. Toys in the Attic, Uncle Salty, Adam's Apple, Walk This Way, big 10-inch record, which was a cover. Sweet Emotion, No More, No More, Round and Round, You See Me Crying. You want me to go first?
Yeah, take it.
All right, cool. So, what for me, Aerosmith? I mean, I didn't really go much into it on my initial impressions. But I will say, to me, Aerosmith has always been like I can get into their albums, some of their albums fully, but some albums more than others. And this is the one where I can get into more of their stuff, more songs on their albums than I can on other records. Like I had this is their third record, like their sixth or seventh record in the early to mid 80s. There's only one track I really like on them, and that's about it. Whereas this one, it's loaded with the core Aerosmith songs. Like you have Toys in the Attic, great song to kick off the record. Great song overall. I actually, it's funny, when I saw Aerosmith recently live on their 50th anniversary show at Fenway Park later last year, they played the three big hits off this record, which were Toys in the Attic, Walk This Way, and Sweet Emotion. It was an incredible show as well, don't get me wrong, but they played the bigger songs off the record because it was kind of like their 50th anniversary show. They want to play their greatest hits, whatever. But when you get into some deeper cuts for them on this record alone, outside of Toys in the Attic, outside of Walk This Way, outside of Sweet Emotion, some other standout tracks to me that are deeper cuts for them, truthfully, are I would say No More, No More, You See Me Crying, and actually big 10-inch record. So for some reason that song just makes me smile for whatever reason. Maybe because it's a cover, maybe because of the lyrical choices that are in the song. Like you gotta love my big 10-inch, just saying. I mean, hey, can't beat that. But there's something about this record, and plus this record's almost 50 years old. In 2025 it'll be 50, which is a little scary to grasp, truthfully. But yeah, my standout tracks would have to be Toys in the Attic, Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion, and honorable mention right there, big 10-inch, and You See Me Crying, truthfully. There's something about those songs that just stand out to me. It's not a perfect record. It's not a 10 out of 10. I do agree. I do see, I mean, you guys haven't made your points yet, but I just want to say, but I will say that there's definitely some filler here and there. But I think Kyle, you're right. I think there was like a 70s thing, truthfully. That was just like hey, like Kiss was like putting out like 6 records in like 3 years or 2 years, you know what I mean? That was their way. And this was kind of like the same thing, but a little less quantity output at the time being. So, but I mean, we got what we got and worked out well. But yeah, like I said, my standout tracks are Toys in the Attic, Walk This Way, big 10-inch, Sweet Emotion, and You See Me Crying. Why don't we let Mike go next? What do you got, Mike?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, so I can't. This is like, I would have to say it's weird. I've always wanted to listen to some of the older albums of Aerosmith because I always like the sound they brought on, Dream On, and I was always like, man, I wonder if they have a whole bunch more albums with that sound, and kind of like comes in with Toys in the Attic, has a very kind of cool, like, just a kind of like 70s sound to it. But there's just one big problem in that album, in that song, is the vocals. The vocals are they just really just make me annoyed, where they're just like, they're doing this noise like with their voice, and it's just like, why? I mean, I get you're trying to come off kind of like, like sounding kind of like, I don't know what they're be honest with you, I don't know what they're trying to go for, but it's just like, it's just a continuous thing that jabs me in the ears as I'm going in that song. So yeah, like it just gets on my nerves. So and I think that's going to become a it's going to become a theme going throughout this album, is the vocals really are what screw up a lot of these songs. So that song for me was a 5 out of 10. The music was actually pretty good, but just irritating vocals and repetitive, you know, to a degree. And then we got Uncle Salty. This is just kind of one of them songs that just, take it or leave it. It just kind of is there, and not a big fan of it. 6 out of 10 for me. It's a little bit better than the first song because it's just not as, the vocals aren't as annoying. And then Adam's Apple hits, same cadence as Uncle Salty. I swear to God, if you actually like listen to them again, it's and then the other one has, it's like it literally is like that. You put them next to each other and they're a little bit different, but they're very similar. Uncle Salty, Adam's Apple, they could go, I could go 6-10 either way on those. So the album really doesn't start for me until Walk This Way. Walk This Way is obviously, it's a classic song, but there's something strange, and I actually looked into this. The Walk This Way on this album is different than the Walk This Way that they released with Run DMC. And the Run DMC one actually goes, walk this way, talk this way. It actually does that vocal line. This one, it just literally goes, walk this way, walk this way. I think they may say talk this way at some point, but they just keep saying walk this way over and over and over again. Or in that same, they don't like, it's just so strange how they would change that in the song of the other song and have it be like that in this album. It was very strange, and I actually prefer the Run DMC version. So not my favorite song, but it was like a 7.5 out of 10. It's a classic. It's got some cool little music. Like the music's very upbeat, and it's kind of it's a good dance song, the people really enjoy. And I've never hated it, but I've never loved it. And hearing this version rather than the other version made me like it a little bit less. So and then we get to Big 10-inch record. This song is just cringe as hell. I'm sorry, but like I've never been a fan of Billy Rock, kind of like the bluesy kind of like songs that some of these bands do. And I just, the lyrics, I get they're trying to be clever and stuff like that, but it just wasn't something that made this band any better. It just kind of was there. And personal preference, I just don't like these style of songs. I prefer the Toys in the Attic sound, or Round and Round, which is like a preview of the sound that I like hearing from Aerosmith. It kind of has that Black Sabbath feel to it, or like Led Zeppelin feel to it, versus like the Uncle Salty, Adam's Apple, Big 10-inch, which is like Billy Rock kind of like like that kind of like you're in a swing, you're at a swing show or something. Not a fan of that sound. And a lot of these bands in the 70s were doing that kind of stuff, this blues kind of like blues rock with the 50s Billy Rock kind of thing. Never been a fan of it. So it's 5 out of 10 for me. And we move to Sweet Emotion, a best song on the album. Sweet Emotion it's a 9 out of 10. It changes up quite a bit, which I like about it. It has that opening riff, and then it hits that next riff, and then it even goes into some other parts, which me, I love change ups. So Sweet Emotion was the standout track. Not quite a 10 out of 10 because it kind of just repeats the same parts again, and you kind of wish it would do something a little bit different. Do something. But anyway, then we get to No More. This is just, it didn't do anything for me. It just, like, I hated the chorus. The chorus is boring. I would have just completely, wouldn't have mattered if it was off the album or not. Has a little of that Billy Rock sound to it. Chorus is just basic, because as I said before, it's 6 out of 10, nothing special. Round and Round, that actually has a cool Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin feel to it, but there's one big problem. It's repetitive. And I get it. Round and round. We get it. We're going round and round. Okay, we get it. But like, do you have to have a musical metaphor here of like what you're talking about and simultaneously annoy the listener with like the repetition? And then most of these people were on drugs back in the day when they listened to this music, so you're probably rocking out something like that, and you're probably digging it because when you're on the drugs, you're basically the repetition can kind of be cool. So I get it's a song for the time rather than a song that will continue on and be interesting later down the road. 7.5 out of 10 is a pretty good song though. You See Me Crying is not a good song, and I'm sorry. It literally had so much potential. You See Me Crying had the big orchestra in the background. Love that. It had the cool kind of minor sounding keyboard at the beginning. Love that. It's got some of the vocals kind of had this cool kind of like whatever to them, but then that's the problem that takes over in this song. The vocals just try too hard to come off like gritty and pain, but in a lot of ways pain my ears. And then at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Steven Tyler starts morphing into a cat. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like, someone give him a vaccination and put him down. I don't know. It's like, what the hell happened? He was like screeching and making these like Gollum noises, like with his voice. And like, I get it. He's trying to come off like unique and kind of like maybe like just pained. I don't know what he's trying to, maybe they're trying to, that's what his crying sounds like, which is horrible. But yeah, it just falls on its face because of the vocals. And I think that's my main theme to this whole album is like, if you put a whole different vocalist on this album, and I would be interested to see how they accompany the music. But with him, it in its standout songs, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, and then Round and Round. Those are the only three songs that personally I will remember, and the only two I'll take away and actually listen to again are Sweet Emotion and Walk This Way, obviously. But yeah, vocals. That's really the slayer here, and it's it's apparent on a lot of these tracks.
Kyle.
Well, interestingly, I completely agree with Mike on the vocals. Steven Tyler is the biggest thing weighing this album down. Like, by far, no contest, biggest issue I have with this is the vocals. So I'm just going to take it from the top like Mike did here, but I will say you're going to see a general theme. I thought the first side of this album was significantly better than the second half. So I'll start Toys in the Attic. Great opener, very like bombastic opening. I actually enjoyed it very much. But again, the vocals are the only thing that really weighs this one down. The vocals brought this from what could have been a 9, maybe even 10 out of 10 track to an 8 for me. I love how it starts off the record. It really kicks it off in such an energetic way. But Steven Tyler's voice just irks me on this one, probably more than any other on the record, except maybe You See Me Crying. I completely agree with you on that one, Mike. Then we go into Uncle Salty, which going from that big bombastic sound from Toys in the Attic to Uncle Salty is such a bad change to have that come directly after it. Just bad track list order. But if we're going to talk about the actual song, it's a decent blues rock track. There's never, it's not something that I would come back to often. If it's on, I'm not going to turn it off. It's objectively a good blues rock song, 7 out of 10. Adam's Apple, I think, is the more forgettable of the two. I also agree with what Mike said on the fact that this is very similar to Uncle Salty in a way. But I find this one to be the more forgettable one. If I'm going to listen to one, it's going to be Uncle Salty. Middle of the Road has a cool horn section that kind of brings up a tiny bit, 6 out of 10. Walk This Way.
Uncle Salty was my name in high school, by the way. So
Walk This Way. Not my favorite on the album. It's up there. It's one of my top 2. Not my favorite. It would be my favorite if it was the version with Run DMC. That is by far the better version. This one, it's good. It has that infectious guitar riff. It's an all-time classic song. it's really a revolutionary track when you see that even without the Run DMC feature, it really was revolutionary in incorporating that like rap style into the rock music. And for 75, that's great. It was ahead of its time. It does carry that attitude to it that I really like. I love when bands have attitude to a song, like that attitude or swagger going on, and it really carries through in here. 9 out of 10. Big 10-inch record. Here's where me and you really differ, Mike. I love this one. It's my favorite song on the album.
Oh wow.
10 out of 10. It's always been a guilty pleasure Aerosmith track for me.
Mhm.
It maintains that like swagger and like attitude from Walk This Way, but in a different way. It's just a cool song. It's a cover, I know, but it's cool. I like it. They do a great job with it. Now, for my unpopular opinions here, Sweet Emotion has never been one of my favorite Aerosmith tracks. It's not a bad song by any means. It's an objectively good song. I find it to be kind of boring. It's another all-time classic, has great guitar work. I love the riffs in it. It has great bass grooves. I just kind of wish that there was more going on in parts. It's never been one of my favorite. 7 out of 10. No More, No More kind of falls along the same lines as Sweet Emotion. 7 out of 10. It does have probably my favorite guitar solo of the record, believe it or not. I feel like the solo on that was great. It's nothing too crazy. Round and Round. Here's where the record takes a huge downturn for me. Because if I wanted this sound, I would just go listen to Black Sabbath. It's just like taking Black Sabbath, but putting Steven Tyler's awful vocals on it. And it's just the same riff repeats so much throughout this track that it drives me nuts. If you took this song and took it from a 5-minute song and maybe cut it down to 3 minutes, it would be significantly better because it's a good riff. It's actually a very good riff. It's well done, but it overstays its welcome so much. And that chorus is so bad. It is one of the worst hooks they've ever had in a song, in my opinion. It just overstays its welcome way too much. Same problem I have. 4 out of 10 on that one. Same problem I have with You See Me Crying. It's not their best ballad. It kind of shows with that like orchestra section on there. It does show kind of where they would head and perfect in a, I don't even know if I would say perfect, but do much better years down the line. It's way too long. Not enough change-ups going on. It's not terrible, I wouldn't say. It's a decent closer. I see why they chose it to be the closer. But it's Steven Tyler's vocals again. Biggest issue with this track, other than it just being long, is Steven Tyler's vocals do not sound good here. I appreciate him and his influence and, his attitude, and he's a great front man. But this, maybe it's just this record. I don't know. When I listen to their greatest hits, his voice doesn't bother me too much. But when I listen to it on the records, I'm like, specifically this one, I'm just like, oh, it becomes so grating to my ears at times. So that's where I'm at with this. The first half I thought was significantly better, then dips a bit, and then at the end it really loses me. I did not enjoy the last 2 tracks. Again, it was cool that they kind of went out of the comfort zone a bit on Round and Round with that like more like doomy feeling, Black Sabbath-y rock, borderline like metal at parts on that track, but it just didn't. If I want that, I'll just go listen to Black Sabbath.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this album is so short that I think that's what saves it in a lot of ways. That like, if I could only imagine if there were like 15, 14 tracks of this, like
Even
what
if there
they
were
would have
12.
been able. Yeah, it would have probably hurt the kind of keeping the ratio of this style track for that style of track. You got your Billy Rock stuff, you got your classic riffing 70s kind of rock stuff, and then you have your ballad to kind of close it out. Good closing song, good idea. Just once again, like I would love to see a different vocalist perform certain songs, and it'd probably be a big plus for me personally. But all things considered, how short it is actually helps the album for me. Makes it easier to listen to without having to go through a ton of filler.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would say only about half of it, maybe even slightly less than half, I would classify as filler. But, again, Steven Tyler's vocals become so grating to the point of I at times just try to tune out his vocals, which is something that I very rarely do. I'm like a vocal guy. That's what I love listening to in the tracks. But the band members, Steven Tyler benefited so much, and Mike, me and you talked briefly about this at one point. Aerosmith has benefited, Steven Tyler's benefited so much from being in a band with good musicians. Because if he was in another band with, subpar guitar players or, drummers, bass players, they would not have made it to where he is today.
Anything else? Any closing remarks at all, or do you want to give our rating and whatnot?
I think we're ready for the rating.
Oh boy. Let's let Mike go first. Mike, what is your rating for Toys in the Attic?
Yeah, I scored a lot of these songs like pretty low, except obviously the classics like Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way. I could be at a 7.5 or 8 on Walk This Way. Yeah, so and then there's a couple other songs I scored pretty low, but in accompaniment to the album, they're not that bad. They're just cringy with their lyrics. Like Adam's Apple, so cringy with its lyrics. Oh my god. I was just listening to that song and I was just like, make it stop. Like the song's not half bad, but the lyrics are making me just just wanting to stop the bleeding. And then same thing with the big 10-inch one. But I mean, obviously, like Kyle was saying, it's an attitude and it's not even their song, it's a cover, which I think they love the attitude on it. So for me, this was a 6.5 out of 10. I could be a 7 out of 10. Add a couple points for iconicness. I mean, the fact that Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, and if I were to gun to my head, would say probably Round and Round would be pretty good song. To kind of bump it up to a 7 out of 10, but I'm like a 6.5 to 7 out of 10 for me, and that's it definitely doesn't suffer from the years, but it definitely doesn't improve either.
All righty, and the Q&A-er, Mr. Kyle, what do you got?
Yeah, so as far as full Aerosmith records, I would say this ranks above the top for me. This is someone that's never been a huge album guy for Aerosmith, but this definitely is toward the top. I'm actually at a solid 7 out of 10 on this one. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Instrumentally, it's great. For the most part, again, Steven Tyler is the weak link here, in my opinion, but it spawned some absolutely classic songs. When you have a record where about 4 out of 9 songs I would consider all-time classics in the genre, you did a good job. So it's 7 out of 10 for me.
Sweet. Sweet Emotion. Bad jokes.
Or as I would say for your jokes, no more, no more, no more, no more.
Oh, I'm being roasted on my own show. Wow. This is rough.
You're about to see JT crying.
Yeah.
Oh,
listen, Mr. Uncle Salty.
Yeah,
relax
right.
now, right? You better walk this way or I'll kick your whatever. I don't know.
You go round and round with this all day.
You better walk this way or I'll kick your big 10-inch record.
That's wow. Okay. Whoa. That's a little gay right there. Just saying. Bravo though. Bravo. But that's what
we bring. That's what we bring to the game. Get the gay game.
Oh God. I just want to give my rating. For me, this was an album that had always been always been around, at least in my knowledge. I mean, I knew Walk This Way, I knew Sweet Emotion, but going back and re-listening to it on my turntable, which I actually have an LP, I have a copy of this on vinyl. I listened to it again before we did our stream tonight. I'm gonna go. You know what? I'm actually gonna go lower than I thought, but higher than I thought I did too. I'm actually gonna, believe it or not, I'm going the same as Kyle. I'm gonna go 7 out of 10. Because the more I listen to it, I realize, all right, this is definitely a product of the 70s. The more I look at it, there's the iconic songs are there. Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, Toys in the Attic. You know, those are their bigger songs. And the humor of Big 10-inch and whatnot. But the more I look at it, and the more I realize, and the more I listen to it, I said, those other songs really just kind of weigh it down a little more than I thought it would. And because it's listening to it more and more listening to it more and more as time before we did our stream tonight, I'm like, you know what? There are other Aerosmith. There's at least 12 Aerosmith albums out there. This is obviously one of their peak. But I would say I would make an argument. This is just my own opinion. That Get a Grip is a little bit better from 1993. That's a whole another ball game.
I would agree 100%.
Another discussion.
I would put Get a Grip as their number one.
Hard to argue against that right there. But for me, this is a 7 out of 10. I'm actually agreeing with Kyle on this because the lesser known songs weighted down a little bit more than I thought they would have. But still, that's no diss to it at all, because it still is a very classic album, a product of its time, but still carrying on through generations of music fans in general.
Make me the villain again. Jeez, always the villain.
You should have just gone up to the 7, Mike. You should have just gone up.
I know. I was like so in between. I was just like, damn.
You should have just gone up, man. I'm just saying.
I know, man. We could have met each other all at the big 7-inch rating. 7 rating.
Our three ratings could have had a threesome.
7 centimeter rating.
Our 3 ratings could have had a threesome. Just saying.
Well, gentlemen, should we pull up the wheel?
Yes. Give me 1 second. Let's go back to here and let's pull up the wheel for next week's album by choice. Good. Whenever ready when you are.
Hold on.
Oh boy.
Wheel's gotten bigger now.
The wheel has gotten bigger.
Oh, God. 10-inch wheel.
10-inch wheel. Yeah.
A big 10-inch.
Oh, and away we go.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Hey.
That is a great sound effect. How did you add that?
Nope, it's just the wheel.
The wheel chooses what it does.
So our next pick is Rush.
First album, right?
Yep.
Their debut, right? Yeah. That's awesome. So next week will be our I can't even talk tonight. And next week's video or next week's stream will be on Rush's debut album. I'm not sure the year of it. I gotta look it up, but I haven't listened to it in a long time. But yeah, we want to thank you all for watching, listening, however you enjoyed us tonight. I want to thank the 2 gentlemen, as always, Mike and Kyle, for putting up with me on all my BS on stream and whatnot. And seriously, it's always a pleasure.
You're forgiven, JT. You're forgiven.
Thank you. I wore my Aerosmith shirt from when I saw them at Fenway Park. Just like
nice.
50 years later.
Angry Joe. Go check out Angry Joe's page.
It wasn't the I hate it shirt. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it wasn't the I hate it shirt. It was Are You Out of Your Mind shirt.
Oh my God. Oh boy.
Well, when I refer to Are You Out of Your Mind is when Steven Tyler's morphing into that cat. I still want someone should check in with him because he's wandering the night as like
the cat.
Cat. Steven Cat Tyler.
Oh my God. You crack me up. But yeah, this is a great album overall. But what do you think about it? Just let us know, DM us, tweet us, whatever you gotta do. Thank you so much for Kyle and Mike for joining us as always. And but for all of you guys, we'll see you guys next week for Rush and their debut album. So stay safe, take care, and be awesome.